Hi everyone, today is March 17th. It is St. Patrick's Day, and I've had a chance to interview Status.im, a blockchain platform that aims to drive mass adoption of the use of blockchain technology. And today I have with me Hutch, who kind of leads up the community over at Status.im. So I'm going to go ahead and punt over to Hutch and have him tell us a little bit more about Status, how they came to be, how long they've been around, and kind of see how he got involved. So why don't you go ahead and tell us?
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, like you said, I'm Chris. I'm known as Hutch in the Status community. I've been with Status since early 2017, and Status originally started in 2016 as a developer grant from the Ethereum Foundation to port basically mobile usage into Ethereum. And what Status really is a mobile first Ethereum client. So it allows you to connect an Ethereum node directly to your mobile device. And we really aim at trying to make it easy for anyone, no matter who they are, anywhere in the world, to connect to Ethereum and all the benefits of Ethereum in a simple, intuitive way. So that's kind of like a brief overview of what Status is.
Cool. So I don't know if you so back when I was a kid, well, I used did you ever use dial-up modem to connect to the internet?
Oh yeah, yep.
Okay, so like back when I was a kid, I used AOL, and it was interesting because basically connect to the internet, you had a username, password, and you'd log in, and then you'd log into AOL, and then it was like this full just like AOL experience, and you had all these AOL like apps, and then you had like a browser and all of that. So it was like a window into the internet.
Sure.
So I had a chance to start. I can't remember if you guys called it the alpha or the beta, but it was a test version of the Status.im app, and I was testing it, I think, back in like September, maybe October. I can't remember, a while ago.
Sure.
And that experience reminded me a lot about like using the internet back in the 90s. It was really cool because I log into the Status.im app, and I had access to obviously a browser. I could message people. I could access a lot of other decentralized applications. Like they had like the same way you would access applications on your mobile phone. I could access Ethereum specific decentralized applications through the Status.im app. So I wanted to see, like, that's kind of been my perspective on Status.im to see what I can compare to. I mean, do you have any insight on the inputs on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a very good comparison. I mean, as we're moving into this age of away from Web 2.0 and into Web 3.0, it's a whole new world of the way that the internet's being built, essentially. And Status wants to make that intuitive for everybody. So at its core, right now at this point, Status has kind of three core kind of functionalities to it, which is the messaging part, which our messaging part on Status is really interesting and unique because we build everything completely on the Ethereum Web3 stack. We're using all of the protocols that are on top of Ethereum. So the messaging is completely handled over something called Whisper, which is the messaging protocol that lives on top of Ethereum. All the messages are propagated. You have to be connected to an Ethereum node to get those messages. And not only that, the messages are dark routed, so they're very privacy oriented. There's no way for really anybody to intercept outside messages. And that's going to allow a lot of really unique ways and abstractions in the future. Because everybody connecting to Ethereum, essentially a message can be something from one account to another account or one contract to another contract. So there'll be some really kind of interesting and unique ways in the future you'll be able to interact with other dApps through messaging. And then we have the decentralized app browser, which also is a window into, decentralized apps on Ethereum. You can access any of those apps on Ethereum. and there'll be some really interesting ways that, you know, status becomes kind of a native gateway. It originally, you know, the terminology we used was operating system for Ethereum, because it's a lot more expressive than just an application. Like, we aim to be kind of that window. Kind of when you think about an operating system, that means a whole lot of different things. It means you can access different kinds of applications, different kinds of things. So, you know, Ethereum is a world computer. So, of course, when we get to the point where Ethereum is completely 100% usable and scaled out, then that kind of will fill out on that that ideal. And then we also have a wallet built in natively to Status, which is very expressive. It allows you to send and receive Ether, any ERC20 or any kind of ERC abstraction in the future as
Sure.
well. Yep.
Cool. That makes sense. And so, so from what I understand, Status is essentially built on top of Ethereum, right? And
Yep.
so, and I guess taking a step back, if I'm trying to explain this to somebody that is not as technical, could you kind of run through a really simple use case where somebody will use a status IM, and in that single session, like kind of like, you know, a web session, a single session, how they might send somebody a message, how they might send somebody a payment, and then an example of an actual decentralized application they might use in that browser.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so from the start, for somebody that's something that we're working really hard on making sure to get right, so that anybody that joins the ecosystem, there's not kind of all these hard to explain developer terminologies that come into play from a user experience perspective. So one example would be like, you open up the status application, and this is something that is actually being implemented and worked on right now, is the identity of status, how you represent who you are in status. So when you log in, obviously you're an account, you're an address rather on Ethereum, and we're porting over the addresses to an ENS subdomain, so you'll be able to choose a username, essentially like a human readable username that everybody's, you know, very used to in an application, and that username will be your identity within status. And let's say you log in, you've got this username, you start a chat with somebody by scanning a QR code, somebody and say, hey, you know, let me another time later down the road, and now you have them as a contact, and you can message them directly, and it's all propagating over the Ethereum network, which means that in a chat you can, you know, send a token, or you can send Ether back and forth to them, or you might be able to start a group chat with some other people. And the different abstractions of chat right now are, there's person-to-person chat, you've got a group chat where you can make it a private group chat with multiple people in that group, or you've got a public group chat where there's people. So all of those are abstracted on status. And then an example of a dApp, I guess probably the most familiar one, you know, people are familiar with right now, was the CryptoKitties, because it, you know, blew up and everything. So that's something like, you'd be able to open up CryptoKitties and get your own personal CryptoKitty. And what I think the most interesting thing about that whole phenomenon isn't actually the CryptoKitties itself, but is the non-fungible token idea behind that. So what that means, even, that's like a kind of weird word. It's like these specific tokens represent a very specific type of cat. So that means that you essentially own that on the Ethereum blockchain. You can prove ownership of that, and that can live anywhere on the Ethereum blockchain. So someone like Decentralized was doing a really interesting thing where they were allowing you to use your ERC 721 non-fungible token. That's a lot of stuff to throw out there at once, but it's like basically a cat that you own, that you can take to somewhere else on the Ethereum blockchain.
Sure.
I mean, when you're talking about the Ethereum blockchain itself, it's something that everybody can be part of, and then that ownership can be shared across different decentralized applications, so you not only your identity could be shared that you create, you know, you want this certain identity to be part of this DApp and that DApp. Eventually in the future, those abstractions will be part of everything where you can, you know, come together with that. So
Sure. That's
yeah,
cool. Makes
that's
sense.
just one example. I mean, the landscape of decentralized applications obviously is becoming a lot more broad. So there's a lot of different use cases where you would be able to access a decentralized app for one thing or another. So yeah.
Yeah, the way I see it is you're seeing a lot of traditional applications and basically the backend architecture just being swapped out from like a client server based architecture to just a decentralized one. And so I imagine a lot of the apps we have today would basically have decentralized versions of themselves, you know, whether that's created by the same traditional app providers or just completely new independent blockchain projects and whatnot.
Yeah, I think the most exciting and important part of that is the data ownership aspect, and that's something, you know, Status is really strong about. Is that you know, when we created the internet, there were a lot, like, it was kind of the same kind of ideals behind what, you know, everyone's so excited about blockchain is like there's going to be this kind of access to this new system. There's going to be this freedom, and, you know, it's going to be very censorship resistant, you know, and what we've seen over the course of the internet being built is that a lot of these larger corporations made everybody the product essentially. So I think the biggest promise of the blockchain is that we can create a new environment where you own your own data and you decide if you want somebody else to have it without, you know, now it's just clicking a terms of service box and then they, you know, essentially mine all your data and sell it to advertisers. There's a whole new, this is a whole new iteration, and hopefully all the, or not all of them, but the large stake of people building these decentralized applications will keep that in mind, and to value the individual rather than the, you know, creating a system where it's kind of like an oligarchy.
Sure. That makes sense. So one of the things I think both myself and a lot of folks that are interested in this space that is of interest is just figuring out like what do blockchain things, like what do working things look like today beyond just sending and receiving payments. So to me, you know, the question for me to you, the question is, what does status.im look like today? I mean, I think I know the answer to that. Like, I'm pretty sure you guys have an app available in I think test flight, but I think this would be a great way for people to know that there are things that exist if they do, and then if they do exist, like how can they see or try them and like experiment with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, right now we have our alpha out. We've been in alpha for a little bit, and you can sign up on our website and put your email in, and you'll get like a test flight invitation or a Play Store invitation. And we're actually going through an audit right now to go into beta, which our beta will be on mainnet, and we'll have, you know, a lot of the functionality that we want to have for actually launching Status to the public. So that's where we're at right now with the app itself. One thing to keep in mind is just that, you know, the core principles of Status have really been all about building everything 100% decentralized, like not involving any kind of servers or third parties in any aspect of building Status. So, you know, that includes the Ethereum virtual machine, which is what Status is run on. Swarm, which will be kind of like the file storage aspect of data sharing on top of Ethereum, and then Whisper, which is the messaging platform. But yeah, you can sign up right now by just entering your email on our website, and you'll receive like a confirmation back, and you can test it with us. And
Awesome.
that kind of leads me into another point about how there, status really is just a community first thing, because this whole idea is built for everyone. It's not like it eventually will become something that everyone has ownership of, and it's an open source code base. It's like an open source community kind of. It's like anybody that has an idea they want to pitch for Status, in the same way that Ethereum is, it's very much a eventually we'll port into a decentralized autonomous organization. That's what we're wanting to build, is something that everyone has ownership. Everyone, I mean, right now today you could fork the entire Status code base and build want to build or remove something that you want to remove and put something here else. It's in the way we license Status, and it's everything about it. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So a couple of things I wanted to just clarify for the audience. So in simple terms, can we quickly mention like the difference between testnet and the mainnet? I think to many of us it might be straightforward, but that we were talking about having the alpha version of the Status decentralized app available, and then like eventually porting some of it over to mainnet. Like in simple terms, what does that mean? Is that kind of like basically saying we're going from a test environment to like a prod environment? Does that mean like we're going from a test environment to like a staging environment?
Yeah, I mean that's all it is essentially. Is that testnet is just for testing out. A lot of decentralized app developers use testnet instead of the mainnet, so they can make sure all the functionality works correctly. It's essentially it's the exact same as the Ethereum network without any real value behind the Ether or any of the tokens. So it's just a testing environment essentially. Yep.
Cool. And then now going to the idea of a decentralized autonomous organization. So, also known as a DAO, or if you're talking about Ethereum, it's known as the DAO. A bit about all that debacle from a couple years ago. So in general, a DAO. Can you just tell us really quickly, towards a non-technical audience, what that would mean? And I think, to folks already in the community, they might understand, but
Yeah.
just understanding in more basic terms, that would be really great.
Sure. Well, so when you talk about the DAO that actually happened, it was kind of one of the first projects that someone tried to build on top of Ethereum, and it's kind of different than the abstraction of what a decentralized autonomous organization could be. So I guess in simplest terms is what it means is that everybody that's part of the network it essentially has ownership and can decide where the network goes, has a decision in that process, and can be part of that process. And then what it means even further than that is that there's no real one leading voice or anything to the organization. So for it to be autonomous, it means that it runs on its own, and that everybody has kind of a say-so in what direction they'd like it to go. And if they don't like the direction it would go, they can, like I said, you can fork the code base and change something yourself. So that, at its core, that's kind of what the Ethereum community is, right? It's this big decentralized organization, I guess, of people coming together to drive this movement forward. So it's essentially the same kind of thing. It's just it's a shared network. Yeah.
Sure. And so that seems to be the vision, is to become essentially an autonomous organization that does not follow the traditional conventions of what an organization is, with like a centralized hierarchy and decision makers and all that. It's more like it's all inclusive for all nodes and all people on the network.
Yep.
to drive the direction of the community and the solution.
Exactly. Yep. That's exactly
So,
right.
and I know that one thing I thought that was pretty cool about Status.im is I saw you guys are actually hiring like full-time resources, like engineers. I think I saw something for like uh, a technical writer and so on. This was a few weeks ago. So it seems like you guys have an actual team um, at the moment. And you guys recently had a Status.im kind of offsite retreat, and it was for both employees of Status and also everybody else, the community. So I think staying true to the vision of wanting to become a DAO. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that has been like, just essentially becoming an employer, but still a on a blockchain? What is that like? Because I think for the rest of us, we're used to just a traditional. You apply for a job for a large company, you get a paycheck, and then you're just kind of part of this big machine. Like, what is that like? Kind of more in the status world.
Sure. Yeah, I'd like to talk about that a little bit. I guess I'd started out by saying we have this really awesome um, application that's really pushing forward the next generation of what work means and what work is. It's called Status Open Bounty, and it's essentially a bounty program where people can get rewarded Ether or ERC based tokens on pull requests on any issue that's bountied. So it's kind of creating this bounty network of, I guess you want to call it proof of work. Whenever somebody makes a pull request to an issue that's bountied, a maintainer of that repository can, review the code. But that's just on the code side. We kind of want to like bounty the world. We kind of want to put bounties on all different kinds of abstractions of whether it be coding or writing or some kind of expressive art. That's another thing. We're involved in an art project that we're really passionate about. But yeah, as far as speaking to people working on the status team, I think the lines are definitely blurred on what it means to be core contributor versus someone external, because we listen to our community so much to drive the direction of status. It's we've got about 70 members that work on status now full time. So it's a really interesting thing whenever you look at it in like the outside world of traditional organizations versus somebody that's building a decentralized organization, because you come together and you form ideas and proposals, and everybody kind of decides on it together. And we even do some interesting things of getting as much community feedback as we can on what they think they would like to see on status. And that's because our community is part of us. So anything that we hear, being core contributor of status, that's our community is definitely first.
Cool. So basically, it sounds like Status has a full-time body of employees, and then they also have community members that contribute in a similar manner. And so you mentioned, like, an example is like you can have a developer that's not on the core team, but they can contribute to the open source code base, like maybe like a major bug fix or an enhancement or whatever, and then it gets reviewed, and if it gets approved, they can get rewarded in some sort of amount of like ether or whatever, what have you. And that's what your bounty program essentially is, right? And that extends beyond just developers.
Yeah, absolutely. It also extends to the kind of emotional rewards of people being part of meetups and different groups, and that's definitely something we're working on to get everybody in the community involved with, and just so that everybody can understand why status is different, because it's really hard for somebody that's used to that kind of system we're all used to realize, hey, you've got an idea, pitch it, we're listening, we want to hear from you, and we want to implement what you guys want. There's no there's no hierarchy of someone saying, hey, you can't do that, you're not allowed to do that because it's got to come down from whoever, so that's definitely a big, huge, differentiator and kind of what we're doing.
Yeah, I think that's the point of a permissionless system, right?
Sure. Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. Yep.
Cool. So I have just two more questions. The next one has, so obviously you mentioned you guys have 70 full-time members. I think I saw on your guys' website, those 70 members are working predominantly what seems to be remotely, because it's like across more than several dozen countries.
Mm-hmm.
So just out of my own curiosity, like how do they get paid? Like, if I work for, let's say, Walmart, they give me a paycheck, and it goes to my bank account. Like, how does that process work for full-time employees? Is it kind of on a case-by-case basis? Do you guys have kind of a broad rule now, or like how does that work?
No, I mean it's considered contractors, so it's contract work. I mean it's pretty standard, but the I guess the key differentiator is people can opt in to be paid with cryptocurrency if they'd like. So it's we're 100% distributed, and there are some different world where we have more core members, and sometimes they meet up together, of course, and we do an offsite every 6 months. So yeah, I mean but the entire team is distributed across the world. I mean, I'm in Tennessee. We've got another community manager in Latin America. Awesome guy Andy, he's in South Africa with the community team as well. Our developers are all over the place. We've got user experience researchers. We've got actual researchers that are furthering some of these protocol level Ethereum improvements as well. That are everyone's all over the place. So that's a real awesome thing.
Yeah, it's awesome. Um, and then I guess for folks that want to stay up to date on status, if they want to sign up to test out the alpha version of the decentralized application, if they want to learn more about working for status, I assume, is that just all through your website?
Yeah. We have a jobs page, but I think the best way to get ingrained in our community is really to join up on our chat room on Riot. We've got a bunch of different channels where you can come in, and we're all really active in there, and we have some really good conversations about everything pretty much. We've got a really active music channel where a lot of different people post their favorite kind of music, and then just a lot of different good discussions around the future of the decentralized web, essentially.
Sure. Awesome. I'll provide those links in the description of the video.
Yeah.
So those are all the questions I had. Did you have anything else you want to get out before we wrap up on this interview?
No, I mean, I think we covered a broad range of topics. I just think that, as we close, it's just important to reiterate that, what we're all building together is just a new generation of share of value, and that's social value, that's economic value, that's all different kinds of abstractions of value, and allowing access to a decentralized world computer can be absolutely transformative for anybody that's involved, because essentially all you need is a mobile phone and an internet connection, and you've got access to this global shared computer, and that's really powerful for I think everyone. I don't really think that there's anyone that can deny the awesomeness of that. So it's I hope we move into this next generation of the web with a kind of renewed outlook on what mistakes were made during building out the kind of legacy internet, and that we can all create a better place together.
For sure, I agree. And I mean, a lot of times people don't understand the positive implications of a kind of a mobile first strategy, especially with blockchain. But for folks living in the developing world, it's not really something we think about. But I think what a lot of people forget is There are more people with a mobile phone than there are with a bank account in
Sure.
the world. And you know, that's the kind of inclusion that's being driven through just using distributed ledgers.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, there's a huge part of that. I can also give you the link to the status white paper, which without, because we keep the interview kind of brief, there's a lot of different ideals that status has that wants to integrate within its system that are really helpful, like the teller network, which is I guess you'd kind of compare it to like a local Bitcoins on mobile, so that anyone can advertise that, you know, they've got ether or tokens in person, and that can really help that point that you're talking about. But I'll provide you the link to the white paper, so any of the users can read more in depth what status is all about, where it came from, and it's a less technical white paper. It's got a lot of details of what it wants to become, rather.
Awesome.
Yep.
Well, that's great. We appreciate your time.
Yep.
Thanks,
Awesome.
man. All right.
Thanks for
Have a
having me.
good weekend.
Yep. You too.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.